Welcome to Topics of Today, Williamson Inc.'s continuing virtual event series. My name is Matt Largen. I'm the president and CEO of Williamson Inc., and thank you for making the time to be here with us today. Before I jump in, I just want to take a moment to thank AP Live, who's been a great help for this continuing series. If your business has a need for studio space in a secure location, please check them out. They've been great corporate citizens, and we really couldn't have done this program without AP Live. So be sure to check AP Live out if you have need for studio space. Today's topic is reopening and what to expect. Late last week, Governor Lee introduced the Tennessee Pledge for restaurants and retail's very specific guidelines for those type of businesses to open. This week at some point, Governor Lee is going to make recommendations and issue guidelines for churches, medical centers, and fitness facilities. With these guidelines, there is an increased need for personal protective equipment to keep your employees and your customers safe, which is why we've actually started and created a working document of companies and individuals that are able to provide personal protective equipment. We've got that information on our website. We sent an email out this morning to all our restaurant and retail members to let them know where they can get gloves, masks, face shields, all sorts of different personal protective equipment. So make sure that you take a look at our website, look under reopening resources, and there you'll find a list of those companies and individuals that can provide your business with the necessary equipment you need to open in a safe manner. I also want to let you know that the Paycheck Protection Program is actually reopened today. So if you're a small business that wasn't able to get funding in the first round or didn't apply in the first round, make sure you talk to your lender today. That program is expected to run out of money in about a week, so make sure, again, you talk to your lender today about the Paycheck Protection Program. I also want to guide you back to our website for a list of virtual events. We continue to update our calendar on a weekly basis, so make sure you go and check out those events. And as always, if there's anything we can do from you from a Williamson Inc. standpoint, please reach out to me or anybody else on our team. We are here to help you and help you meet your immediate needs. As I said before, the topic of today, again, very timely, it's reopening and what to expect. Governor Lee, again, released guidelines for nearly all Tennessee counties about reopening the economy, starting with restaurants and retail this week. And I thought I'd spend the next few minutes just walking through those recommendations from the governor's office. First, he issued guidelines for all business. This is universal. So from an employee protection standpoint, it's screening all employees reporting to work with COVID symptoms, recommendations for temperature screening employees, direct any employee who exhibits symptoms to leave the premises immediately and seek medical care, implement workplace cleaning and disinfectant practices, mitigate exposure in the workplace by implementing social distancing guidelines and modifying scheduling, allow employees to work from home as much as possible, plan for additional potential COVID-19 cases. Covered employees and employers and employees should be aware of the provisions of the Federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act, update the employee illness policy to include symptoms of COVID-19, or create a COVID-19 specific policy, limit self-service options, and post extensive signage on health policies. Again, those are to protect employees. For employees, stay home when feeling ill. Increase hygiene practices. Wear a cloth face covering. Very important, not an N95 or medical mask, which should be reserved for healthcare workers while at work and in public. Practice recommended social distancing to the greatest extent possible and abide by the guidelines established by your employer. Specific to the restaurant industry, for employee protection, follow sanitation frequency guidance. Have dedicated face coverings and dedicated gloves worn by all employees at all times. Require all employees to report any symptoms of illness to supervisor and require notification of COVID-19 positive case in employee's household. Provide safe COVID-19 training for all food handlers as soon as possible. For the consumers, limit the number of customers in the restaurant to 50% of seating capacity. Tables should be spaced at least 6 feet apart. Limit tables to no more than 6 guests per table. Mark any indoor or outdoor waiting area so that social distancing standards are met. Bar areas should remain closed. Live music should not be permitted. Screen customers for illness upon their entry into the restaurant. business process adaptations for restaurants. Place hand sanitizer stations in areas. Sanitize all front of house contact services every 2 hours at a minimum. Use menus that are disposable or sanitized between each use. Use rolled silverware and napkins stored in sealed bins. Sanitize all tabletop items. Sanitize chairs after each table turns. Do not offer self-service buffets, condiments on a counter for use by multiple tables or beverage station reuse. And for the retail industry, staff should wear face coverings, not N95 or medical masks. Again, that's reserved for healthcare workers. Provide training on personal protective equipment based on CDC guidelines. Provide a sanitizing station. Stagger shifts, breaks, and meals. Provide regular updates and trainings for employees. Require all employees to report any illness to supervisor. Prohibit congregating in break rooms or common areas and limit capacity of such. Allow areas to allow for safe social distancing at 6 feet whenever possible. Consumer protection. Limit the number of customers inside a store to 50% or less of store occupancy. Customers should wear face coverings. Consider dedicating shopping hours or appointment times for the elderly, medically vulnerable, and healthcare workers. Establish one-way aisles and traffic patterns for social distancing. Increase curbside pickup and even delivery options. Assign dedicated staff to prompt customers regarding the importance of social distancing. And finally, from a business process adaptations for retail, establish enhanced cleaning protocols that follow CDC guidelines, including sanitizing shared resources after each use, and sanitizing all high-traffic, high-touch areas every 2 hours and when visibly dirty. Use a clearly designated entrance and a separate, clearly designated exit. Use plastic shields or barriers between customers and clerks at service counters and clean them frequently. Allow store hours to allow time for enhanced cleaning. Adjust store hours to allow time for enhanced cleaning. Prohibit the use of reusable bags. Suspend the sampling of food and personal hygiene products. And task management level employees within a store to make sure they're monitoring compliance of people in the store. So again, as I started the program, there is a list on our website of companies who can help provide that information and those resources for you if you're in retail or restaurant. So I am really excited about our panel today. We've actually got a fantastic panel. We've got Ellie Westman. She's the president and CEO of the Williamson County Convention and Visitors Bureau. We've got Bradley Jackson. He is president and CEO of the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce and Industry and also was on the Governor's Recovery Task Force. And finally, Andy Marshall. He is the owner of A. Marshall Hospitality Group and is the current chair of the Williamson County Convention and Visitors Bureau. And we're actually going to go ahead and start with Andy. The first question is to you. I know this has been a very busy and exciting day for you. You all opened a number of restaurants in Middle Tennessee. So first question is, how's everything going?
Well, so far so good, right? It's a lot of responsibilities to opening, and we've been tempered our enthusiasm a little bit to make sure that we're being very diligent to keep our employees safe and our customers safe. So the best word to describe it is grateful. We are extremely grateful to have our employees back to work.
That's great. I even noticed that Mayor Moore was one of your first customers this morning too.
He was our first customer. He was standing at the door when we opened, and it just lightened up the whole room. Everybody was very excited to see him come in, and it just shows his dedication to making sure this goes right too. He wants to encourage us to do the right thing and be successful along the way.
That's great. And Andy, we'll have a chance later to get into the kind of things that you're doing specifically for your restaurants, going above and beyond even the governor's recommendation. But before we jump into that, I'll go to you, Ellie, first, and then Bradley. We've seen surveys, you all seen surveys. We know how this has impacted your industries, your business, your members, your constituency. But Ellie, what have you heard from your members maybe that would either surprise us or what hasn't been covered like it should in terms of the people that you interact with in hospitality that have been affected by this pandemic?
I'm not sure if I've learned anything that has surprised us. I will tell you that every tourism business that I'm aware of has laid off pretty much their entire staff, maybe 2 to 3 employees left. So we've seen great layoffs throughout the industry as a whole. And like you mentioned earlier, a lot of them are very interested in getting reopened. As Andy said, we don't want to get too enthusiastic because we've got a lot of guidelines we need to follow.
Right.
But most of them that I've talked to are going to go above and beyond that because they want to instill that consumer confidence to get back out. And so we want to support and help them to get those employees back, help them with whatever their reopening might look like. Because from what we've learned, everybody's reopening in a different way. Some restaurants have opened today, some have not. Some retailers are planning to open on Wednesday and some are not. And so there's a lot of different phases that are happening, and we're trying to gather that information and be a good resource for all of them.
That's great. Thanks, Ellie. And Bradley, you bring a different perspective from a statewide standpoint. What has really stood out to you, maybe that's been undercovered, or what would surprise us in terms of how your members and your constituency statewide have been impacted by this pandemic?
Sure. Well, a number of businesses, all across Tennessee were deemed an essential business. So a number of them have been up and operating for quite some time. So they've had opportunities to develop, best practices, protocols by kind of going by the CDC, WHO guidelines. We worked with Governor Lee and convened about, 200 individuals from all across the state in 11 different subgroups. So for each industry, they developed best practices. The one thing that I came away with were the business owners are passionate about the safety and health of their employees and their customers.
Right.
And they oftentimes go above and beyond. The only concerns they ever had were sometimes when customers don't comply, to requests that they make. But overall, it was a very, very good process.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that, Bradley. Ellie, back to you. You referenced about some of the way the businesses have been impacted in layoffs. Are there any data points that you want to point out or bring forth that paint a picture about what exactly we're facing right now with this current situation?
Absolutely. We've been in really close contact with the U.S. Travel Association, and they're doing a lot of different research and surveys. They're forecasting right now that tourism is expecting an impact of 9 times that of September 11th. So, when this initially first hit, there were so many conversations in the tourism industry of, well, what happened after September 11th and what happened after the 09 recession? And now this is so unprecedented. It's a little bit hard to follow those guidelines because we've never seen anything like this. We've never seen anything that has affected everybody, every business, no matter what type of business you are, every state, every city, and really globally. So it's very interesting to just try to do some forecasting around that. I will tell you right now, our hotel occupancy, which is one of the metrics that we track, is right around 14%. I've been in tourism a long time. I've never seen a number like that, not even after the recession and not even after September 11th. So those are pretty big numbers that we're going to have to then climb out of as we move forward.
What's the hotel occupancy normally in Williamson County, Ellie?
This time of year, we'd probably be around 73 to 75%.
Yeah, and of course that does have a ripple effect throughout the entire economy, we know. So moving from the general statistics, Andy, talk about how this has affected your restaurants specifically, and even the industry as well.
Yeah, sure. When we first started, the first thing we started doing was preserving cash to see, we talked about how long we could last in the number of weeks if we preserve cash by temporarily laying off employees, talking to our landlords about deferring payments, talking to our banks about deferring loans, calling all our vendors. All that was buying time.
Right.
But I would say about last week, a lot of restaurateurs, including myself, started counting it by the days instead of the weeks because we knew time was running out.
Right.
The PPP's been a lifesaver for us, and I'm hoping the new money's being announced will help a lot of the smaller ones that missed out on the first round. But it's been devastating from the standpoint of not knowing what your future holds, and laying off employees and knowing that they're being affected, that they support their families with the monies they make through our restaurants.
Right.
It was a heavy load and probably our lowest point when we did that. we did some things to cheer ourselves up. We did a lot of charitable work, and when we took the focus off ourselves and started focusing on what we could do for others, seemed to lift our spirits up and kind of carried us through this.
Yeah, and one of the things that happens when you own a small business, and I mean, your employees become like your family. And so it's really more difficult when these things happen, and knowing, again, they rely on that paycheck to feed their family because becomes an even bigger challenge. So, Bradley, you referenced earlier some of the work that you did on the Recovery Task Force, but I'd love if you wouldn't mind to expound on that and give us a behind the scenes into what that work actually looked like from your standpoint.
Sure. Well, the guidance really from the governor was to develop from really kind of industry experts by each of their, individual sectors, what are the best practices that as we open up our economy, we can steer businesses towards so that they know for those, even if they've been non-essential at the time, so that they can look at, with the goal of being we have to maintain public health, and we need to do it successfully to ensure that our economy can pick up and grow, and that consumer confidence grows as well. The larger plan that Tennessee has laid out, we monitor a number of other state plans. I think there's about 19 states overall that have started this process. There's been some criticism in Georgia. Tennessee's plan is not as aggressive as Georgia, and I think it strikes a very good balance to start to open things, but let's do it in a safe and healthy way to get our economy back.
Thanks, Bradley. And since you were part of that group, what's the most important thing for businesses in Williamson County to know about those guidelines from the governor?
Sure. I think these are not mandatory guidelines. The governor's been very, very adamant about that. In addition, the guidelines that he rolled out apply to 89 of Tennessee's 95 counties. So the other 6 counties, larger metropolitan areas, Nashville has recently released kind of their guidelines, which do not include any businesses opening until they get through a phase 1. And then as that's successful, it goes to phase 2, so different businesses can open up. So I think the governor providing some uniformity and a lot of very strong guidance is very helpful. That's easy to understand. The one challenge we do here is around PPE. So I'm so glad that you all have provided a resource page, because at the end of the day, businesses need those resources if they've been given that guidance. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Bradley, I'm not sure how much you can share with us today, but do you have any sense of when those next recommendations will come down from the governor in terms of other sectors that are able to open?
Sure. Well, the governor was very clear, and he told us he has not put a timeline on anything else. This is the first phase of restaurants and then retail operations coming on Wednesday. He did say there were a couple of areas, as you look at CDC guidelines, things are categorized in kind of their overall risk. One of the more that have the high risk are community gatherings, concerts, sports events. He did say that there was kind of common agreement that would be at a stage, but the next phase that we would see would be, other businesses, barbers, cosmetologists. When we categorized our businesses, we kind of put them into what are the businesses it's proximate, but you're not touching people, because that makes a lot of difference in the guidelines that they're to go by. So I would say the next phase of those businesses are the more kind of direct contact type. So if our numbers continue to stay low, contact rates, and we, with good data and good testing, we know what's happening, then there'll be some expansion.
Okay. And I was just about to ask about the metrics. I assume people are monitoring the metrics in terms of what's allowed to phase in. Are there certain things that have to be met specifically to phase the next group in, or how is that process working?
So Nashville has taken an approach of where they will watch their cases. If their cases increase a certain amount kind of over a 14-day period, then that will determine their next step. I think what makes this tricky is that, the way this virus works, what's happening right now won't be seen until really 14 days later.
Right.
So monitoring and data is crucially important, so that if we do see any sort of trends change, we be able to make adjustments and not have a completely, devastating impact, a few weeks out.
Sure. Yeah, and before I jump to Andy, is this group still meeting, Bradley, that you're a part of?
We have submitted our report to the governor.
Okay.
The governor has taken it. So we expect, as he does announce these other phases, it will include parts of that. And it probably will be an ongoing effort too. One of the big things they tasked us with was to really get the word out to businesses and customers too,
right,
to know that, that this is serious, but if we all work together and we follow guidelines, we will be successful.
Right, and there's a great network of chambers of commerce, obviously across Tennessee, that can do that with their members in the community. So Andy, back to you. I guess a couple things. One, what's your take on the restaurant guidelines from the governor, and talk about your role in providing information and recommendations to some members of the governor's task force?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to be on one of the subcommittees. I was on the restaurant committee that was providing information. A lot of the guidelines that we see today came out of those meetings. Most all of them came out of those meetings. There's a few things that are added to it. So it's for us, it's kind of like I was telling somebody the other day. It didn't put us on the tip of the spear, but it put us somewhere on the handle of the spear that we kind of knew what was coming. So we've been preparing over the last 2 weeks to 10 days of getting our gloves and masks and all these things ordered, our temperature readers,
right,
so that we would have those, because we knew some of those were going to take some time. So we kind of got in on early, ordering those things to kind of be ahead of the game. But I thoroughly enjoyed the group I worked with. It was a thoughtful group. We worked really hard on trying to provide guidelines that could be adapted, because all restaurants aren't equal.
right.
You have, fast food restaurants. You have a blended drive-through dine-ins, and then you have restaurants like ours that pretty much solely survive on dine-in. So trying to appease and make sure that everybody could meet those guidelines and have a good baseline to where they could operate safely for their employees and their customers was very important.
Great. Thanks, Andy. And that's good to know that you had a group that was looking at this across the entire state of Tennessee as well. And after I go to Ellie, Andy, I'll jump back in just a second and ask you about what you're doing specifically. But Ellie, talk to me about your work communicating with Tourism Commissioner Mark Ezell during the planning stages for that business recovery group. What kind of things did you convey to him?
Yeah, I serve on the Tennessee Tourism Committee, and we've had a couple calls just to talk about, which have been really great because it's from people from all over the state are on those calls. So it's great to hear what others are doing as well, to see how we can implement that here. And I think it's just so important that we talk not only locally, but I've been having a lot of discussions on the national level and with my counterparts in other cities to ask them what they're seeing and what their trends are, because we know from past experience that tourism usually bounces back really quickly. We would love to see that happen here when it is safe to do so, because we know that generates a lot of dollars for our community. So what is that balance between getting those visitors back, but we don't want to do it too soon because we want our residents to feel safe if others are going to start traveling in. So there's been a lot of discussions around that as well.
Right. Well, and that actually leads to my next question for you, Ellie, specifically. Talk about the Williamson County Tourism Recovery Task Force, and specifically about the phases and outreach to locals first before tourists.
Absolutely. So we put together a small group of about 10 or 15 people that represent all the different sectors of the tourism industry, so hotels and restaurants and retail and attractions. We had our first Zoom meeting this morning. We've got great feedback from that Zoom meeting, just of how people are moving forward. And so from our perspective, from promotion and advertising, we paused all of our advertising. There's no reason to ask people to come in when it is not safe to do that, or safe for them to travel out of their own communities and so forth. That what we're hearing and what the trends are that we're seeing, where some people have started having some success with this, is as states start reopening, is a pretty aggressive marketing campaign to the resident. And let me tell you, that goes against everything we're supposed to do, because we're supposed to be bringing visitors here. But to get the restaurants, as Andy said, a nice steady group of people in this morning for breakfast, those are the residents. Those
Right.
are the residents that are going to come out and help get our restaurants open 100% and get our retail open and our attractions and so on and so forth. That's really important. And once we, and of course we have to follow the state guidelines. Right now we're open at 50%. So then maybe it's going to be 75%, then 100%. So we want to get that consumer confidence of our residents coming out and supporting our local businesses. And then we're going to go into phase 2. What we know from our research is that drive markets are going to be key to success. People are going to be very hesitant to jump on a plane. So our drive market is going to be very important to us. So not only are we going to promote to our regular drive market, but we're actually going to open that up a little bit to some markets that we've not promoted to in the past. Asheville, North Carolina is a good example of that. So then we will do that drive market because we know that's a safe thing for folks. They are safe. They feel good getting in their own car and driving somewhere. And then as we continue to recover and open up and so forth, then we will go back to our regular marketing campaign, which is more of a national presence.
Yeah, that's great. And Ellie, you and I have talked for years about, look, when a company moves to town or someone moves to town, it's the same reason that someone want to visit a town. And everybody wants that local experience, whether you're coming from just down the street or you're coming from, across the globe. So we've learned how important it is. One, I think I know organizations work so well together. You and I work so well together because at the end of the day, we both want the same thing. We want a thriving Williamson County, and that relies on both tourists and on residents.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that from our research. We actually asked our tourism partners as a whole, what percentage of your business is visitor versus resident? And as a whole, it came back about 60% of their business is visitors. Now, you have to remember that's just tourism.
Right.
Visitor-facing companies or establishments. So, I've told people for years, and Andy's probably sick of hearing me say this, but, a lot of our business, they're not going to be able to rely 100% on residents, nor can they rely 100% on visitors.
Right.
If somebody wants to just be visitor-facing, you're not a hotel, then that's not going to be a successful formula for you either. So I think the combination of both is really the winning combination for us.
That's right. And even with hotels, a lot of it is corporate business from the headquarters in Cool Springs. So again, that just shows how you've got to have all these pieces in place for healthy economy. We could talk hours about this. We have in the past. But actually, what you said, and I'll jump to you, Bradley, for just a second. Ellie, you talked about phasing in from 50 to 75 to 100% of capacity. Bradley, what were the conversations like in the recovery group of when that phasing could happen, going from 50% capacity to 75 to 100%?
Sure. Well, first it was based on, when you look at CDC guidelines of kind of, social distancing, the 6 feet, then you take kind of the total square footage that is authorized by fire code, then you take half of that. Similar to exactly the conversation you all had is we have data where we can see things are looking better or numbers have stagnated. Then that is an opportunity to grow that. And I do know for restaurants and for a lot of service businesses, having a restaurant at your capacity is really key because it's difficult to maintain profit margins if you can only allow 50% of them in at any given time.
Right.
So doing that in a safe way by following all the protocols would be was our recommendation. There was a lot of discussion around that.
Yeah, absolutely. We know how thin the margins are to begin with. And Andy, that's a great segue to you about how you're opening your restaurant. And again, it was a conversation you and I had last week where you talked about going above and beyond from a safety standpoint. So talk about what that above and beyond looks like for you all. Maybe if you have any specific examples about what you're doing to make sure that first, your employees are safe, second, that your customers are safe too.
Yeah, so, we submitted guidelines and then we realized, these are kind of baseline guidelines that everybody can operate under. But we as a company, where do we want our standard to be? Well, we want it to be above the baseline so that we're operating in a safe manner to protect our employees and our customers. That's number one priority through all this. And so, we started looking at menus. We talked about, going to paper menus as opposed to presenting our regular menu and then wiping it down each time. And then we went from paper to saying, well, what if we had a QR code so people could use their own phone? They wouldn't have to handle anything.
Right.
They could just hover over the QR code and they'd have the menu right there on their phone. And that's been really well received today already, of people saying, oh, this is great. I hope you keep this in place, kind of deal. The sanitizing buckets, we have a timer, and we're changing all our sanitizing buckets every hour. All utensils in the kitchen are being taken off the line and replaced with fresh sanitized utensils, and we're washing all those. We are breaking down our dish machine every hour. We stop, running dishes through it. We sanitize it inside and out. We put it back in service. These are things that we would normally do a couple times a day just to maintain normal health. But right now, we're amping those up so that we're just assuring best practices that we could possibly put in place to keep everybody safe. And it's time consuming. The number of times we change our gloves in the day, I would say, is highly amped up. Every time we take our gloves off, we wash our hands again, even though we're putting gloves on. And we've always been concerned about gloves as it being a false sense of comfort because you have gloves on. Well, we're really talking about the number of times we change our gloves. If you take a plate to a table, when you come back, you take and replace those gloves. If you pick up dishes, when you come back, you replace those gloves, as opposed to wearing them for 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes. They're being changed more often. So just amping up everything. We've always been a scrutinized industry from the health standpoint, and rightfully so. It's important, and we've taken those standards that we've known and we've amped them up. You talked about in your first reading about the back of the house all having had the COVID-19 training, which is being offered free by ServSafe. We're requiring all employees to do that. And then all our managers and all our back of the house, if they've not been certified in the last 2 years, their certification is still good, but we're making them take the full ServSafe program over again and be recertified, just to keep everything fresh on the mind of safety first.
No, that's great, Andy. Thanks for walking through that. Just to quickly follow up, have you been able to find the suppliers you need for the personal protective equipment?
We have. We've had to jump around a little bit from time to time, and we've had some of our suppliers tell us, hey, it's going to be 6 days or 5 days, and they've been good about giving us dates. And we've been, telling them if that's not enough, that we'll continue to look, but we'll come back to them if we need to. We started stockpiling. I shouldn't use that word. We'd all think toilet tissue when I say that. But we started ordering the
we'll edit
things
that
that
out,
we
Andy.
wouldn't need. That's right. We started ordering things we need about 2 weeks ago in anticipation.
Right.
We didn't know if it was going to be today or if it was going to be May 1st or if it was going to be May 15th. We had no idea of knowing what that date would be, but we knew we were getting to the point that we were going to have to, the economy was needing us to open back up and get our employees back to work. So we started taking steps about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And Bradley, kind of a segue to you. As you had these conversations in the business recovery group, talk about the conversations around specifically employee and customer safety. Did those conversations really lead this process?
Yes, those were considerable, and the end goal is to maintain health and build consumer confidence. Really, I would say that as part of the working groups, the guidelines or the recommendations that they came up with were really, really good. We were very impressed with everything that came out. And I think too, the world after all this, hopefully this all be gone in a few years, but I do think there will be changes that happen kind of more on a permanent basis, both, deeply in our economy, with the way people purchase and do things. But overall, these are guidelines too that I think will stick around for some time now. But yeah, employee safety and customer safety, those were top of the mind for everyone.
Thanks, Bradley. Just a couple more questions before we finish up. Actually, just one more to Ellie, and then I'll do one for the group. But Ellie, what's your take on the retail recommendations from the governor? And then what have you heard specifically from Main Street stores in downtown Franklin about their plans for reopening?
Most of the retail shops that we've talked to will follow the Tennessee Pledge. Unless it's not something they can do, like one of our stores is very, very small, so to try to create a path or a shopping trail is really difficult for them. But I would tell you that almost everybody I've talked to has either said, we're going to follow the pledge, or we're going to follow the pledge, plus we're doing this, this, and this. I think what's important is they want to get their employees back to work in a safe way, of course. And they want to open their doors. And so to do that, they're like, if I'm going to do that, then I'm going to follow this pledge because I want my employees to feel very comfortable coming into work. And I want the consumer to feel very comfortable coming into the store that they know that we're following these guidelines that we need to follow. So I haven't had any pushback from anybody that says, oh, these are ridiculous, or I think they're very thorough. I think they're very self-explanatory. I don't think there's anything on there that's making anybody go out and spend a whole lot of money to get it done, and things like that. So I think mostly they were well received and will be implemented to a degree.
Great. Thanks, Ellie. Well, as we close up, and this is really just for everybody, so jump in when you want to. What, and this is look at your crystal ball, right? You can be futurist here for just a moment. But what should we or can we expect in the near term for the Tennessee economy, Bradley, for tourism in Williamson County, Ellie, and the restaurant industry in Tennessee, Andy? And anybody is welcome to jump in.
Well, I'll jump in first.
Okay.
Here's what we're seeing from tourism, from the research that we're getting, is there are going to be people that are ready to go, right? It's called revenge travel. They've got pent-up demand.
That is a terrible term, Ellie. I've been seeing revenge travel. Where did that come from?
It's a horrible, horrible term. They're using it on the national level because I know it sounds like they want to come here and do something really bad. But
I know, right? Revenge tourism?
They've been home.
Yeah.
You're right. For 7, 8, who knows how many weeks, right? Some have been home longer than others.
Right.
So we know there are going to be those percentage of people that are going to jump right in and they're going to say, ooh, it looks like Williamson County is open, and they're going to come and see us. And then there's going to be the people that are going to dip their toe in and they're going to maybe come a little bit later. What we're seeing right now in our research is that August is probably going to be where we really start seeing a little bit of an upswing. I don't know if we'll get back to where we were last August, which we had really great numbers in last August. And then those are going to be people that are going to sit and wait. And, we don't know what the fall is going to look like. And there's a lot of hesitancy around that. So what I do know, though, that we're in such a great position because people are looking for adventure. They don't want to be in a confined space with a lot of other people. So you can come and walk down Main Street and have a lot of outdoor activity along with our wonderful parks and trail system. So there's a lot of really positive things that I think are going to give our visitors confidence to come see us when that timing is right. And I feel really good about that. We know from past experience that tourism usually pops back quickest to make that impact back into our community. And we're excited to help make that happen.
Great. And Andy, you mentioned what this may do long term for the industry. What's your take on how this could impact both in the near and long term?
Yeah, so in the near term, we're just trying to generate cash right now. And that's where most of us have suffered is the longer this has gone on, if you had cash reserves, you've bled them down and you're depleted. And so now getting to operate, all we're doing is generating cash flow. Bradley knows this. For a restaurant on the margins that we operate, until we get up to about 75 to 80% of our normal volume, we'll be losing money. But we're willing to do that right now in order to get this thing started and to get things moving. But we're going to have to get to that point to where we're operating at more of our full capacity before restaurants are going to see any kind of signs of profitability. And so the longer this goes on, the more restaurants will see that this won't survive it. The PPP has been a life preserver for those that have it, but I can tell you there are thousands and thousands out there that haven't received it and waiting to hear and hoping to hear. And this next round of money will go as quickly as the first round of money went.
You're right.
So my fear is if they've not secured their money, that there'll be some that won't survive this, and that's a sad thing because small businesses are the heartbeat of our community,
right.
and restaurants are really the lifeblood of that heartbeat. So I'm hoping for the best, but I know we're getting to some desperate times for many of them.
Right, and that's true across the country. The small businesses make up the vast majority. The big companies always get the headlines, but it's the small business that sustains the economy. So Bradley, from your standpoint and your perspective statewide, what does this mean for the near term and long term for the Tennessee economy?
Sure. Well, I think we are all optimistic that we will see kind of a V-shaped recovery. You know, once things do get behind us, there will be a lot of pent-up demand when people feel good. They will go up. I will say that the near term is, this we've never ever experienced anything like this. It's a pandemic. There are so many things that right now are unknown. You know, your state and local government revenue. Because the business climate impacts that. The entire healthcare industry has really been impacted very, very hard. You know, automotive manufacturing. You know, we do see where if you're an essential business, manufacturing, for example, it's in that category. About 70% of them are still running. But with the changes that have happened in really customer demands and goods and products and services, it's just such uncharted territory. Especially if this hangs around. If it is cleared up, vaccine, antibodies, something like that, I think it will be a V-shaped recovery. There will be a lot of pent-up demand. People will go back, business as usual. I do think, though, there's some lasting trends in kind of, telework. I think a lot of companies, whether you're non-for-profit or a large corporation, you realize you can still be productive and people can work differently. And I think to Ellie's point, more people are going to feel comfortable with that, longer term. But overall, we will all, get through this. It's going to take some time to recover, but, looking for a V-shaped recovery.
Well, and I think, too, we know the fundamentals of the Tennessee economy were strong before this. The fundamentals of the Williamson County, Middle Tennessee economy were strong before this. They'll be strong after this. It's just how long does this go and what's the ripple effect? And like Andy said, the longer this goes, the larger that ripple effect will be, and no one really knows the answer. But I really appreciate you all making the time. Ellie, Andy, Bradley, thank you for being with us today, sharing your insights and perspective on what's happening with the Tennessee economy, the restaurant industry, and tourism, and the economy of Williamson County. I greatly appreciate it. So again, thanks for being here. Thank you. Thanks, Ellie. Go to our website, again, williamsonchamber.com/coronavirus for all different updates for you and your business, and that list of resources to get your personal protective equipment as your different industry has guidelines for reopening over the next several weeks. Thank you for your continued investment in Williamson County through your investment in Williamson Inc. And please stay tuned for a brief message from AP Live. Thanks again.
There will always be a need for in-person meetings and gatherings, but sometimes that's not possible.
We still need to work together as teams. We just need to do it in a new way, and we can help facilitate those conversations just all online.
We're able to offer some virtual solutions that are going to allow for that business to still take place and for those important conversations to still happen. Whether it's online polling, whether it's a digital touchscreen, whether it's a fireside chat or a panel, whatever is best going to communicate your message virtually, we can make that happen.
AP Live has been doing virtual meetings for a very long time now. We've been doing them all over the world, and that expertise and that experience is what will allow us to help you communicate your message and be collaborative as we move forward in the digital world.